morning, everyone. It is the Old School podcast about contemporary education issues and the solutions therein. It is Dr. Stephen Bourgeois and Ross Miller coming at you very early on a Sunday morning. Whose idea was this anyway?
I think you canceled on me, or maybe I canceled on you. I don't remember now. It's been a day.
We have to stop hurting each other this way.
I've been up for 20 minutes, so. But I look kind of like I've showered and everything. Your hair looks like you're just getting out of bed like minutes ago.
Let's not produce the television of the mind. Let's just go ahead and keep ourselves and our looks as innocuous and as unknown as possible, perhaps.
It's probably for the best. Well, where are we headed today with this? I have good feelings about this episode.
Well, what we're dealing with today is lesson plans. Now, this is certainly in-house, and I don't know to what degree a parent might find a connection here. Certainly, they'll find a connection in the sense that the product of lesson plan writing and building and what have you directly affects how a teacher does their business with the students. But that is the topic for today. So the idea of lesson plans is a controversial one. And I'm kind of wondering, as a former administrator, where do you fall on, say, mandatory lesson plan writing?
It's really interesting because my tendency is to not to encourage. It's kind of like mask wearing in Texas. They're not required, but we encourage you to wear them. And I don't like the idea of requiring them. I have collected them, and they're submitted weekly. And looking at them from the assistant principal perspective, I never looked at them. I mean, the fact that they submitted and it was checked off, but what exactly is a principal or someone going to do? Look at them and say, well, your third activity today is a little bit off. Have you thought about connecting that? So it's kind of an exercise of something. The point is that teachers should be planning, and
right.
But there's a lot in that lesson plan that doesn't get taught. That's my impression. And well, let's start with yours. The lesson plans that you make, because you've had many principles over the years and many requirements. It probably has changed, but I bet you still have to make them now.
All right. So there's a couple of things here about lesson plans. First of all, yes, like masks, they've always been encouraged. But I think a lot of teachers also see it as something much like you described. This is, in essence, busy work. And it's rather unfortunate because, as you say, lesson planning makes sense for many different reasons. But when administrators demand it or require it, we can't help but feel that there's a pile somewhere in the principal's office or the vice principal's office, whoever is collecting these things. And that's where they stay from the moment they're collected to the moment they're thrown away at the end of the year. And so I think sometimes teachers confuse the effects of them being required with their utility. And if they're not required to do it, then they're less likely to do it. Now, if you're a good teacher, you're constantly scoping out stuff. And my first mentor, none of my principals, none of my administrators ever required that we do lesson plans. But my first mentor said, always stay 2 weeks planned ahead. And the idea is that you don't go too far, because Lord knows something's going to scuttle any far-reaching plans that you make. But you don't want to go too far ahead, but you also want to be far enough ahead where you can kind of see where this ship is going in the short term. And just from a point of view of being able to keep in mind, every time a kid asks a question, every time someone is posing something, you have kind of the larger context in which all this stuff is going to happen. And then you can kind of answer the questions based off of that. So it provides the lesson plan provides a direction, but it also provides a context about what you're doing. But as far as like administrators and what have you, no one's ever required it. Now, the only time I've seen it done is more as a punitive measure. So if someone has a teacher that isn't doing so great, then they might say as part of their growth plan or something along those lines that they have to do lesson plans. And again, that doesn't do lesson plans any favors, not unlike making people do it. Making it a punitive measure, again, kind of cheapens what the purpose of lesson plans are in the first place.
So if you want to punish a teacher or encourage them to leave, which is often what a growth plan is, you require them to meticulously produce these lesson plans. And wow, I remember myself. I'm a teacher pleaser, so if somebody says lesson plans at 8 o'clock on Monday morning, I'll definitely send them. But I would devise a template as if I actually taught in a template. It should have the objective, the opening activity, some content, some transitions, some closure. All those buzzwords were in there. And then each day looked pretty much like the day before, but you change a few words in there, change the Monday to Tuesday and so forth. And then you'd submit them each week, and they look so much alike that you really could have just photocopied one and say, here it is. I do these things every day.
You're right. Well, and it makes you wonder, is there a way? First of all, do you think that it is helpful in any sense to mandate that teachers do lesson plans?
I think that they should create, I guess, what you would call a scope and sequence. So here are the things that I'm going to treat in class, not necessarily cover like covering material, but these are the topics that we're going to get into. But from an administrative standpoint, I'd rather not look at the lesson plans unless it's maybe a new teacher who needs help with that. But I think in college and in education, school, they do learn how to do that, and so it's not like it's brand new to them. And I would bet that the new teachers are probably more serious about lesson planning than the more mature teachers.
The problem with the model of lesson plans coming out of college is that it involves a bunch of things that, well, I mean, have you ever seen? I'm sure you have. I mean, the college model of a lesson plan that they make all their students do, and so I had that teacher observer. So she asked me about lesson plans. I said, well, if you're asking me if I do lesson plans, I said yes. Because I'm sitting here at the beginning of each week and kind of mapping out the next 2 weeks. In reality, you're doing an extra week every Monday, to kind of stay 2 weeks ahead of time. But it's nothing of the formalized nature that colleges demand. And, because I've been doing this for a while now, that's good or bad. If you're doing it for a while and then you come down to a streamlined version of like 2 lines, then you're not doing a lot of thinking. But if you are doing this for a while and you have a general sense of what it is that you want to do, and you just need to kind of put something on paper to kind of shape your direction, like I said, your direction and your context, in college, they're telling these kids to find the TEKS, the exact TEKS 12.4, or something along those lines. And I'm not sure that's terribly helpful. The scope and sequence thing, I mean, all that stuff's online. Someone says, oh, you want a scope and sequence? Here you go. You sit there and just, you find the scope and sequence for your course and you send it in. Certainly not arduous for the teacher to do. Also, you could question whether it's productive or it's useful.
You could argue that the lesson plan is inhibiting to some extent. I can recall in teaching German, I have a lot of flexibility.
Yes.
So and if anybody comes into my room, they don't understand what's going on anyway. So there's a little bit of comfort with that. But still, the ability to change as you want to, and listen to your students and decide, okay, we need to spend more time on this or so forth. But I've turned in lesson plans, and by about Monday afternoon, that weekly lesson plan is shot.
Right.
And I think that's an example of good teaching to some extent.
So when you say it's shot, what is it that tends to scuttle a good teacher's lovingly crafted lesson plan?
Well, you really just don't know how far you're going to get into a topic. So if you plan it out so much, it bleeds over to the next day, or usually you don't cover as much as you think you will, and you need to slow down a little bit. I mean, you could cover material and your students are left behind, but you're moving forward,
Right.
You're hitting those things. So at one point I did something a little bit silly, and every once in a while I do that. But I had this idea that I would react to my students totally. And it was during, one of my times before I left teaching. So it could have been the sign of a breakdown or something. But
pretty soon you're showing up in costume as George Washington.
I've never done that. But I thought, why don't I give my students some paper to take notes? Because we're gonna start class with a question, and I don't know what the question is. It's kind of like these podcasts. We don't know where we're going to start. And so I told them to get out a sheet of paper and take notes, and I'll take notes on the board. And so it was all speaking German. I'd ask a question, and the conversation would start. Every once in a while, I'd write something up there, and they'd write it down. And it was just this seamless conversation for about 40 minutes. And I thought that was pretty good. I think we learned a little German there. And so here's where the idea kind of formulated. We had a copy room where I think a volunteer would run copies. So all you would do is put the master down there with how many copies you wanted. And then in a couple of days, all these copies would appear. You take them upstairs, and Bob's your uncle, as you say.
Exactly.
So at one point, it was during this kind of rough time, I brought in a single blank piece of paper, a piece of typing paper, and I put it in there, and I said 500 copies. There's nothing on it. Bourgeois. And I think they made the copies. Maybe they just gave me more paper. But if they would have showed that,
handed you a ream. I mean,
yeah, basically by the ream. But I probably should have been fired right there. Looking back, I thought it was a good idea at the time. We'll just keep starting with the question.
There's no concept of the instrument, so
yeah. So that's kind of taking a lesson plan to the other level and to silliness. But
well, I think one of the things that I think about with regards to lesson plans ties into another pet peeve we have, especially in regards to TEKS. So TEKS in the state of Texas are a series of bullet-pointed objectives that teachers are supposed to cover in the course of a year in a given course.
You know what they mean? What does TEKS stand for?
Texas Educational something or another.
You got like the Texas right. It's called Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills.
There you go.
But
that was my second guess.
Okay, but it's a we say it in the plural, but the S actually means skills. Right. So it's one of those ambiguous terms. Is it singular? Is it plural?
In general, the term is innocuous. I mean, the idea of Texas is so the state in a kind of an anthropomorphic sort of way has essential skills and knowledge, and then, but I kind of equate it to the idea of rubrics.
Ooh.
And so
it's too early to say the word rubric. That'll get us both to stand up.
Too early, and on a Sunday, no less. We should be crossing ourselves and asking for forgiveness for mentioning dearly beloved. But I mean, the idea that a rubric constricts the student and any kind of learning objectives passed down from on high, in this case from Austin, is restrictive of the teacher. Now, you could say that there are some teachers that need structure and they need restrictions, like people who hand in blank papers and say 500 copies, please. But
It was legendary. I told about 2 people now, more maybe about 3 or 4 more people know about it.
The tens of listeners that we have will spread the
Yes.
word, but they still talk about it at the school today. Do you remember that time that wacky German teacher that we had?
Yes.
But I mean, I find that sometimes, well, I mean, all this stuff. I mean, anytime the Texas school board in Austin gets together and decides, here's what we should teach, automatically the conversation gets silly. Who are they? But I mean, the idea is that who the hell are they? What do they know? And usually it's political driven. In Texas, it's a more of a conservative bent, and somewhere else, it's a liberal bent. It's all problematic though, because what it's designed to do is to kind of constrict and construct U.S. history. In my case, which is a tested subject, not unlike the freewheeling wacky days in German class.
Oh, no, no, no. We have tests there too. There's,
Yes,
well, I can't remember what it's called, TEAC or tech.
something. But in U.S. history, oh man, U.S. history just drives people batty. They don't know it, but it doesn't keep them from pontificating on it. And so they're gonna ask teachers, not ask, they demand that teachers go in different directions. But all this does is it limits the exploration, and it limits the context in which all these demands are being placed upon. So if they say you have to teach this person, well, why? Or even why not? But just the idea that someone says you have to teach this person. Okay, who do we not have to teach? And can you make an argument for why we don't have to teach that particular person? It's an endless cycle of ridiculousness as far as the conversation goes. And it does make you frustrated. And what it does, and we talked about this before, all these essential skills and knowledge and what have you, and all these kind of rubric type of things, what it does is it tightens the curriculum to a few salient, though discombobulated, disconnected points. And basically what the kids are learning, it feels like sometimes, and again, this all depends on the teacher, because in my example, I'm surrounded by a lot of great teachers, and they know way more than what TEACS demands that we know. But for other teachers, you see the comfort in sticking with it as the play is written. And the kids get no concept of history beyond that. And so therefore, it's very hard to develop an appreciation for a subject when you're looking at it through such a constrictive lens.
So the lesson plan connects to that. I think we've talked so much about testing, but the TEACS align with the state test very closely. But the odd thing is that there are so many more TEACS than test questions.
Yes.
So it's a little bit of roulette happening as well. So you're trying to cover, I hate that word, this incredibly diverse, and as you said, almost unconnected set of standards and statements and TEACS. But the test may address a quarter of them or something. So you're kind of guessing. And in that lesson plan, if you actually look at a form for a lesson plan for university students, in the very right hand corner it said TEAC, and so you list the TEAC. So imagine a teacher who's serious about writing a lesson plan. They have their screen open, looking at all these TEACs and saying TEAC 4.2 or whatever the hell it is, and writing it in that square. And the time that it takes to find the TEACs,
right,
to read those individual statements, you could actually be creating lessons, real lessons. I would argue that the lesson plan you turn in, if you're asked to do it, is a fake one.
Right.
It's completely for show. And sometimes I would do that. I would say, okay, here's my fake one. It looks great. But then on another piece of paper, handwritten, this is my real lesson plan. This is what I'm going to do today.
Right. Yes, I think, like most things, what lesson plans do is it encourages kind of end run around, especially if you're a good teacher. I mean, if you're a good teacher, the notion of lesson plans demanded upon from on high is, what the hell they want me to do? It's just sitting there. You grumble as you kind of photocopy the same lesson plan and just send it in. I guess in German, it would be funny if you just handed in all your lesson plans in German.
I thought about that. I never did it. That would have been really, really smart. I always spoke nothing but German, as did my students when anyone walked in the room.
Because they're fluent in German, clearly.
Yeah, they must be. They have to be because of those 5 minutes or whatever. But the test, to me, as an administrator, if I wanted to require anything from teachers, it is to submit, some tests. Not necessarily every test, but the test tells you, as much about it than 4 weeks of lesson plans, because you know what they really think is important. So
Right.
maybe take a backwards work. And the beauty of that is that most teachers have already made their test, meaning you have to make it to deliver it. So it's
Right.
just as easy to send it to that vice principal who's observing you once in a while and say, hey,
Right.
look what we're doing. But is it a gotcha thing, or is there a requirement from above, meaning above the principal saying we need our teachers to submit lesson plans, and then so the principal says, okay, I don't believe in this, but we're going to require them, wink, wink, to the
Yes.
faculty.
Well, I mean, I think anybody who says we need to we need to require lesson plans, this is an example of someone doing something just because they can. Because that same Yahoo that's demanding lesson plans isn't reading them. It's like you said, they're in a filing cabinet somewhere, or they're in some sort of Google Doc drive, or to use the modern parlance, But that's where it stays. I think a principal on an average daily basis has enough time to look at one, much less 100 lesson plans put forth by a teacher. Hell no. They got stuff to do out the wazoo. I mean, they got meetings and they got conferences and they got budgetary, their head is swimming with the amount of stuff that they have to do. So anytime someone says we need to demand lesson plans, well, that's just, like you said, it's just making your teachers jump through hoops because you think that's what you should be able to do. Now, so all the talk thus far has been rather negative about lesson plans, but they do serve a fun.
That's what we do here.
Yes. We tear things down, but we don't build them up. But here we're going to build them up.
Okay.
For the teacher and for the teacher only, what would you say are the required or essential elements of a good lesson plan?
Okay.
If we have young teachers out there listening, maybe, and I know at least one young teacher we have listening. So we have young teachers out there listening. They're getting this rigmarole from the colleges, from the various schools of education. Setting aside what they're demanding, what would you advise a young teacher to include in the process of creating their own lesson plans?
It's a real question there, with some teeth, because the problem is that every class, every lesson is a little bit different, but now we're talking about the real lesson plan, the one that nobody sees, but that you actually use when you teach.
Correct.
So it's more than saying, okay, here's our bell ringer activity, which I hate. I hate that idea. You should just be able to conduct business. You want to have some idea of what you're going to be doing and not doing during that hour. And so in a way, you have a goal, that you'd like to reach. Maybe a few different activities to get there. But often there are, tasks that are housekeeping tasks that you need to remind yourself, okay, we need to talk about this and this. You have to have your materials together, but that's part of preparation anyway. So it's kind of redundant. You've already have your stack of sheets here, whatever you're going to do. You don't need to say, I need these stack of sheets. But it's a hard one. It's a hard one because classes are different. But I mean, what do you do? Because I'm looking back, and a lot of that was right up here in my head. So I knew exactly how I wanted class to go, And a lot of it was dictated by the materials that I had prepared, because I don't, just walk into a class. I mean, as much as I say I did. So if you have your materials, it's kind of redundant. You're going to cover that just like you have a Google Slides or a presentation. Well, that's part of it is you're going to do that and have a discussion.
Well, for me, I think the idea of the question, I think, is essential. And you may have more than one question depending upon, if you have like an hour and a half class. I mean, you might have 2 questions or 3 questions. But for me, what I try to do with the question is I also try to scope out, and how many directions could this go? And so as far as what you tie in, as far as what you build into the question, but then also what might a student bring into the question as a point of correlation, and then there's a question, and then there's a kind of a statement, what you hope the student walks out with as far as knowledge, as far as ideas, as far as something to think about or chew on or what have you. And this is not easy. Not so much it's not easy to craft it, or it's not easy to create it. What's hard is having something that makes the impression on the student so that they walk out of the class talking about it. Now, that's a very idealized notion of what a classroom might be. And to suggest that kids are going, you know what? I wasn't anticipating where he was going with that question. I'm just, first of all, guy's brilliant. First of all, you can imagine these kind of conversations. It's never been said.
Never.
But you can just imagine kids at a lunch table going, first of all, props to Mr. Miller. I mean, that's some pretty savvy questioning he just had there. But look, why don't we go back to this idea? Are we really possessing a free will? And then, just the idea that kids are doing that. There are some that do that, and God bless them. And they sustain you when they talk about, I had 2 students who on summer vacation a couple of years ago, they had gone to Paris. One of the kids had like a rich uncle, and he had a house in Paris or whatever, and they invited them to go there and stay and hang out and do their thing. And we got to talking about I can't remember the painting now, but we got to talking about some painting in connection to an historical piece of work or historical lanyap or what have you, that they apparently it stuck with them. And so they're in the Louvre, and they take this picture of themselves in front of this painting. And they sent me this email with a picture saying, Mr. Miller, we were thinking about that lesson where you talked about this, I was like, holy crap, and this is like, you couldn't help but cavil a little bit, telling all the other teachers, look at this, look at my kids, they're in the Louvre, for God's sakes, And so it does happen, and it's remarkable when it does. And I think teachers are too quick to think that a lesson was not effective, because like I've said it before, and I'll say it again, history is a slow burn, and it kind of comes back onto the student in rather unexpected ways. Like when you're in Paris in the Louvre, you see a painting, I had another kid that was doing a mission work or something like that in St. Louis, because Lord knows St. Louis needs help. And she was at some graveyard. She came across the graveyard of Dred Scott's wife's grave, and Dred Scott was a very important court case dealing with the status of slaves in 1856, 57. And she had come across this grave, and she felt the need to take this picture of it for me with, and send it to her and tell her, that she told some of her friends the essence of the Dred Scott case. And you're just sitting there going, my God, I could rule the world if I could just get up, 50 of these kids, but it makes you understand that lesson plans and the effectiveness of lesson plans. First of all, it has to be pointed. Second of all, it has to be with the idea that you will leave those kids with something to think about later. And then every once in a blue moon, I've been teaching 25 years. I only gave you 2 examples.
Yeah, but I was waiting for the third one.
but it's the idea that this does have the potential of sticking with the student. If you craft your lesson correctly, and in doing so, if you direct your efforts intentionally enough, you do have the ability to make this happen.
Well, a lot of classes are based upon a text, that has an outline, and so it's tempting to just follow that, and that kind of is your lesson plan in a way, and your curriculum and your test and everything is right there in one little container. Um, Classes like we teach are cumulative. I mean, my task is teach them German, and
Right.
it's not like, I mean, the you can't just teach it and then everybody gets it and okay, I understand that and move on. But it builds, so there's a lot of routines, I think in every class, and you make sure that you keep to those, and then maybe something new and exciting. But overall, um, I can't say that anything that I put on that scribbled list wasn't in my head already.
Right.
And that's maybe the whole point of this is that
Mm-hmm.
if you're a good teacher, you know what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I hate the idea of writing objectives on the board. Do you write objectives on the board?
I do not.
Well, a lot of principals require that.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean when you see those four little bullet points, on the wall? It
From a student point of view, that's all you have to know from today's
that's right.
today's exercise.
Yeah. So we're covering this, as it were, and the teacher.
It's just a formulaic kind of crutch, that sometimes a teacher will use to stay within the lines, as it were. But it also does not allow for kind of more of the, by nature, creativity, both in the classroom and in lesson planning, cannot be charted, and so, you can sit there and say, those are my objectives. If you say those are my objectives, and that's, by God, that's what we're going to do, it cuts out any creativity in the process. It cuts out any response you have to the student or the student to you. It prevents any kind of exploration, which might give a kind of a richer understanding of the content beyond what those objectives are. And so it's formulaic. I mean, it's like watching watching a TV series where you know how it's going to end at the end of each. You lose interest. At least that's how I see it. I mean, how do you view the objectives on the board? You said you didn't like them.
Well, I don't like a lot of things, but particularly when they write out a full sentence, students will be able to this, as if you're teaching to to somebody who walks in, or to yourself, or I mean, of course it's the students. We know that, and the students will not be able to do that at the end. I mean, it's going to take, usually most things that are of any value take some time, and it's like, okay, we got it. We can check that off. We've met, and then often those don't get erased for weeks or something. If I wrote it up there once, it's just going to stay there,
Right.
But it's for show. And I guess that's something that always has bugged me, that certain things that teachers have to do are for show. They're pretend. And then there's the real thing. I like the end of a school year, and I'm sure they don't do this anymore because everything is digital. But we did have to turn in often that last test for a very good reason. A student's absent and they need to come back in. So I liked that, and it made me think that's actually really helpful on a different level as well. Mm-hmm. If only someone would read that test. The other thing I kind of liked is that you would turn in your grade book, and there was a finality to that. It was maybe wrapped with a rubber band, and they put them on the shelf, like probably never to be seen again, but it's a record in case there's a controversy. Now we have that digital, but I liked that. You turn it, because it was like, that's it, year's over, I turned in my grade book, now I can go do what I want.
You had to turn in the grade book?
Yeah, I can remember doing that. That was at a rather large district, and so I was there for about 6 years, and at the end, I mean, the end of the school year was really, really hard because closing it out, in a single day, I found challenging, and we can talk about that again another time. But the turning in the grade book was final, and so in a way, that's the summation of all these little lesson plans and tests, because it's right there. This is what I really did, and you can look at it if you want to, and it has attendance and grades and whatever else, but there's a finality to it.
I never turned in grade books. I have all my grade books.
Hold on.
I do.
You have a grade book, a real grade book for every So you have 25 of them.
It may be 23, 24, 23. But yes, I have a grade book for every year I've taught.
Have you ever opened one up and looked at one?
When I have had a student who has reached out to me for one thing or another, usually just to remind myself who the kid was sometimes, but also to remind myself of what they did in class. I will sometimes open the grade book and see, find the kid, find the class, kind of take a look at just what they did from a number standpoint, which is horribly misleading. But sometimes what that'll do is it'll jog my memory as to the individual themselves, you know. And I tell you where I got this from. So my U.S. history teacher in high school in Maryland was a guy by the name of Mr. Richardson. I hope he's not dead. He's a nice guy, but he's getting up. He's got to be getting up there by now. And he just had a kind of irreverent, kind of sarcastic, acerbic kind of wit. And my favorite joke, we had some girl that was like in her sophomore year. She wore like typically preppy kind of clothes, like a white blouse and a skirt or pants or whatever the case may be. And then like the next year, as a junior, she was dressed all in black black hair. And I remember the teacher said, it's quite an ensemble you have there. It's everything kind of coordinates, you know. And it was designed to be kind of an offhanded remark, but it stuck with me. But the thing that also stuck with me is that after I graduated college, I sent him a letter. That's when you did letters back in those days. And I sent him a letter saying how much he had inspired me and how much he had kind of pointed me in the direction of being a history teacher. And sorry, hang on a second. I'm so sorry. You okay? Maybe we can take this out. I'm so sorry. You all right? Okay. So my daughter came in with coffee and I didn't notice it. And I was just trying to gently kind of redirect her. And then I hit the coffee cup. And so
you spilled coffee on your daughter?
No, I hope I didn't, but I think it mostly went on my hand and on the floor. So
you said "ow," not your daughter, who could have sued you technically.
She could have. She might still. I don't know. It's early yet.
Well, we'll leave this in. That's pretty funny stuff.
But anyway, I sent him a letter and I said, you know, you're the reason why I became a teacher, and so he wrote back. He said, well, first of all. He said, you know, you were never a really great student. I'm surprised you chose history as a profession. And he quoted me my grades for that year that I had him. I'm like, how the hell does he know? Who remembers some average run of the mill kid from 30 years ago? But he kept all of his grade books. And I asked him, I said, what, you know, because the culmination of the letter was that we ended up meeting for a beer somewhere, and we just got talking about talking shop. And I asked him, I said, why do you keep all your grade books? He goes, you never know. He said, I just like the idea of being able to look back on those if I need to and find Ross Miller, who did, you know, C's or B's or what have you. And that's probably
being kind,
too generous. Yeah. But it always kind of stuck with me. It's just kind of a means by which to, well, maybe it's not that strange from a historian to preserve the past. And so to be able to have a record of that. And the record of that grade book is not just a record of what the kid did, but it's a record of what you've done. And to that end, there's value in that. And so I have a grade book for my entire career.
Well, it is symbolic, and you start the year with nothing in it, and you fill it up. All of those assignments that you see students turned in and got graded on and so forth, those are valuable, you know, potentially, because you remember that could get ideas. I don't think that people hold on to their lesson plans for years.
Right.
You know, I would be stunned if anyone kept one of their lesson plans beyond a week. And maybe that tells us how valuable they are. You know, they're not holding on to those. They go to the grade book or the filing cabinet, but probably not that one thing that we've spent 45 minutes talking about.
Well, I would suggest too that, you know, going back to lesson plan may not always be helpful unless there's been some sort of evaluative process at the end of the day that you then wrote an addendum in your lesson notes. This sucked, or this was great, or, you know, unless you have some sort of like additional commentary. um, it may not be that helpful. And maybe the only thing it does is it convinces you to do the exact same thing over again with no context of how it happened or how it worked the last time. So,
Well, it none of this inspires me to go back to teaching, because I'm thinking about a lot of things, and a lot of the things we touched on today were kind of unpleasant, except for your story about the students in Paris. I like that.
Yeah. God bless them. So,
Well,
but
we can end on a positive note,
yes,
and I probably confused the new teachers, because I didn't give a very good answer on what to put in a lesson, because again, to me it didn't really apply, and that's the thing. Lesson planning doesn't apply to certain subjects.
but I think the notion of the question, I mean, the Dalai Lama once said that if you wake up in the morning and you can't find your mantra, you might as well just stay in bed. And you could easily equate that to the question: why are you getting up? What are you doing? What is your function today? What it is that you want to achieve today? And so I think the question that you bring up is an essential part, not just in lesson planning, but really, Steve, in life. But no, I'm trying to be silly here, but at the same time, I think it is an essential quality to everything that we do. What is the question behind it? So
that's a better thing than putting these 5 objectives with tiques on the board. Just write a mantra. I love it.
damn right, yeah. So on a Sunday, no less. So
Yeah,
we're gonna write a mantra. So
well, I'm impressed that you woke up. Something about this conversation got you pretty alert.
well, that and the coffee spilled in my hand probably helped as well. But
and you better go tend to your daughter now.
Yeah, she's probably got hurt feelings. She's probably concerned that she did something wrong. So that makes me
kind of
feel bad.
kind of like all those students over the years.
She's almighty. All right, Herr Dr. Bourgeois, have a great day.
You as well, Herr Miller.